I would use what was going well at work to sort of be a justification for, clearly it can't be that bad. I can't be that bad as a husband because look at what God is doing at church. Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. Hey, I'm so glad that you joined us today. Our goal here is to help you thrive in life and leadership. And today I'm going to do something different. Okay. I'm taking your questions. I reached out on social media and in my Art of Leadership Academy, and I said, it's time for you to pick my brain. What do you want me to talk about? So today it's my answers to your questions. And this month, we're going to try a couple episodes on this, one this month and then one next month. This month, I'm going to focus more on the personal questions that you asked on ambition, on burnout, on sustainable leadership, friendships, and even a really hard issue, firing people. And so thank you so much for all the young leaders who submitted questions. We're going to take as many as we can today. The next month, we're going to come back. We'll talk about organizational challenges. And this week, I'm going to give away a copy of my book, At Your Best, How to Get Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor. 5 of you are going to be the lucky winners. So I know most of you are listening to this podcast, not watching, but to enter, here's what you do. Go to my YouTube channel, or if you're watching on YouTube right now, leave a comment saying, I'm ready to live at my best. We are going to pick 5 people and we're going to dive in. So wherever you're joining us from today, so glad you joined us. We're going to dive into your questions in just a moment. But first, a word from our carefully chosen partners. This episode is brought to you by Gloo. As a leader, you're called to shepherd your congregation, but what if you're missing red flags or making decisions in the dark and leaving your church's future to chance? That can leave you feeling out of control as a leader. Because here's what you need. You need insights that eliminate doubt and uncertainty and that give you clarity to lead with confidence so you can make better decisions that impact your ministry's reach. So you can take back control, and I'm going to tell you how. All you have to do is connect church metrics with Gloo, and you'll be able to track attendance, giving, salvations, and volunteers in real time. You'll also get powerful AI-driven insights. You'll be able to compare numbers year over year across campuses or even against, get this, national trends. Leaders who see what's coming and those who don't are often the difference between thriving and struggling churches. So the question is, which one will you be? So if you're ready to lead with confidence and wisdom, visit gloo.com/insights today. That's gloo.com/insights today. All right, our first ever Pick My Brain episode. So if you're ready, let's dive in. I'm going to start with a question from Austin, a young leader in my Art of Leadership Academy, who asked, and this is his question, quote, I'm interested in what you would say to your younger self regarding your ambition and high achiever personality. So I definitely still have a high achiever personality, okay? In the time of founding Connexus, the church that I helped start, and experiencing fast growth and then burnout, how would you mentor yourself to capitalize on the positives while managing the shadow side? And then he asks, how did this impact your personal, spiritual, family, and leadership life? Well, Austin, that's a great question. So we did start Connexus a number of years ago. And for those of you who are church planters, you know what an epically exhausting season that actually is. And it was about a year before starting Connexus, actually, that I burned out. It was a decade of meteoric growth in our church. And so I want to get to this part of your question first. How did this affect my personal, spiritual, family, and leadership? So honestly, I'm just giving you raw answers here. It was a double-edged sword, all right? I did not do everything well. So first of all, I am a very driven, ambitious person. I spent a lot of the last 30 years trying to unpack that ambition to figure out where it's godly and where it's not godly. And I would say throughout my 30s leading up to the founding of Connexus, there were a lot of ambitious motivations that were not healthy. And it negatively impacted my personal, spiritual, family, and arguably leadership life through my 30s. So what did that actually look like? To be specific, we are growing like crazy. We had year after year of 30% growth. So if you've ever been part of a growing church, you know how difficult that is. They say roughly 15% growth is sustainable. In other words, your systems are going to be able to keep up. with your organizational growth rate, but we were growing at 30% year after year, and I was hanging on for dear life. Now, the problem with my ambition and my high achiever personality is I love that. And things were not going as well at home in that decade. And I would use what was going well at work to sort of be a justification for, well, clearly it can't be that bad. I can't be that bad as a husband because look at what God is doing at church, right? So I looked at that. And then the other problem with that, Austin, to be totally transparent, is I probably took the growth rate, because we were the fastest growing church in the country in our denomination, as a badge of honor. So there was definitely pride there. And then I saw it as validation from God. Well, there were some pretty unhealthy impulses underneath that. I liked the growth too much. So what saved me, by the grace of God, and this is going to sound very counterintuitive, was my burnout, which happened a year before launching Connexus, where we reconfigured as a church, became non-denominational, and started Connexus. My burnout was a dead stop. I thought I was on top of the world. Some of you know the story because you've read my books, listened to this podcast for a long time, but I gave the talk of my life in front of 2,500 people in Atlanta, flew home, and fell off a cliff. And what that did, because my burnout was so extreme, my life came to a halt in the summer of 2006, almost 20 years ago, and I had to reevaluate everything. I did not declare a finish line, so my body did, and I couldn't get back. Like before I would get tired in my 30s, I would get tired, and then it's just like, well, just keep going. And people told me I was going to burn out. I wasn't listening, but my burnout for its depth got my full attention. And so I had to reevaluate everything I knew, because basically I broke. Like the model I had used to that point in my life, 4 decades, fell to pieces before my eyes. So I started to investigate with counseling and friends. Okay, clearly the pace I was running at is not sustainable. Clearly the things that made me successful broke in the end. What do I need to do? And that spent, I've talked about this, 3 to 5 years kind of reinvigorating my life, reevaluating my life, trying to figure out what I needed to do differently. And here's the lesson I would say, because you may be at an inflection point right now, Austin. I don't know 100% of your story, but for those of you who are listening, who are at a place where you feel like your current system is breaking, go deep. And what I learned, I had about 3 months where I could barely do anything. And then, I had a lot of muscle memory. It kind of came back. But I spent several years kind of reinventing, rethinking, praying through how do I live at a sustainable pace. And the lesson is, if God wants to go deep, it's because he wants to take you far. If this kind of, influence or whatever you want to call it that I have now had happened in my 30s, I think I would have been a headline. I think I would have been a stat. So I really had to go deep, and that happened around 40, 41. And that was because God wanted to take me, further. I didn't know that at the time. I was just trying to survive day to day and be a better husband and father and boss and leader. And I would say one more thing before I move to the next question. On ambition and high achievers, you got to keep your priorities straight. What I didn't know in my 30s, and I know now, is that people are more important than tasks. I had it flipped. I honestly, and I remember saying this out loud in front of other people, there's some people who are people and some people who are task people, but I'm really a task person. I just got to get it done. That's wrong. Okay. That's just wrong. I had it flipped. And now I realize people are more important than tasks. I still love to get stuff done, but sometimes I can be that bulldozer. And what I've realized is I got to grow my character, because it's my character, not my competency, that determines my capacity. And I got to work twice as hard on my character as I do on my capacity. So those are some thoughts on that. I've been working on my character hard for 20 years. I am not done. God is doing something very active in my life right now on the issue of pride. It's not fun. It's not great. But I know I'm going to be better for it. So that's an honest answer to your question, Austin. Work twice as hard on your character as you do on your capacity. All right, now to the second question. Dan dropped this one on Instagram. How do you navigate being a professional Christian? Thank you. I do not get this question enough. I have wrestled with it for years because, I didn't think I was going to be a pastor. I was going to be a lawyer, right? Thought about doing radio for a long time too. And then I thought, wow, I get paid to believe in Jesus. Now, that's not true. Of course, I don't get paid to believe in Jesus, but I really wrestled with that. And the other thing I realized too is, particularly because our church was trying to reach a lot of unchurched people. When there were unchurched people in the room, I'm like, they are already disbelieving what I say because I, quote, get paid to say this stuff. Now, obviously, I believe it to the core of my being. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone into ministry. I still believe it. But yeah, for 20 years as a pastor, 25 really, where I was still teaching regularly, I was paid to be a, quote, professional Christian. And anybody who works on church staff knows what this tension is. So I've wrestled with it. And this is what I decided early on. This is like, these are good decisions. I shared a lot of bad decisions already. I want to share a couple of good decisions. I decided to develop a devotional and personal life that had nothing to do with ministry. 3 years, I think it was about 3 years into me pastoring a church, I realized that I was starting to cheat on my Bible reading. If I was preaching on Romans, guess what showed up in my morning devotions? Romans, right? So I picked up a 1-year Bible a couple years into ministry, and I still, to this day, I was reading from the 1-year Bible this morning. And what that did is it said to me in my head, it was like a mind game. Okay, if I got fired or I left ministry today, this is what my devotional life might look like. And right now, I'm not technically paid to be a professional Christian anymore. I'm not on staff at a church. But I opened up my Bible, read 5 or 6 chapters of scripture this morning. Another thing I did early on in leadership, and this is going to sound probably a little heretical, was I developed a prayer life outside of work. It was so easy, in ministry to be overwhelmed day to day with just prayer requests that come in. And we have prayer teams and everything. And I do pray about work. But I thought, okay, if I didn't work at a church, what would I be praying about day to day? And so the majority of my prayer life, actually over the last 25 years, more than that now, has been about things that I wasn't necessarily, like I would pray about staff challenges or whatever, people who are in hospital or people who were, dying and that kind of thing. I would definitely pray for that, but I tried to focus the majority of my prayer life on what would happen if I didn't work for a church. So I would say the principle there is develop a devotional and also, prayer life that has nothing to do with ministry. So another question that I started to ask, not so much at the beginning, but at the end, and I remember challenging my team with this when I was lead pastor, is I would just ask them, if you were to stop ministry today, what would be left of your faith? And again, if you work at a church, this is a mind game, okay? But I would ask myself, I'm like, what would I actually believe? What would I not believe? Because I am paid to say these things and research these things, etc. And I think that's a really good question. If you were to stop ministry today, what would be left of your faith? Just wrestle with that one. And the good news is, now obviously I equip church and business leaders and all that stuff, but I'm not on church staff. And I'm just a Christian who sits in church and goes to small group. I'm heading to a small group tonight and reads my Bible. And the good news is there's a lot left of my faith. And if I stop doing this tomorrow, I think there's still a lot left of my faith, maybe more. I don't know, but I think that's a great question to ask and maybe challenge your team with. So thanks for that question, Dan. All right, next one, Brian Hayes. This one again from my Art of Leadership Academy. All right, so let's go to the next question. This is from Brian Hayes inside the Art of Leadership Academy. Brian asks, have you discovered a healthy way to balance staying informed with culture, politics, and world events without it consuming your thoughts? Wow, there's a big question. Honestly, I am working on it. I do not have a great answer for this. I'm going to give you my answer, but this is a constant tension. And we've got episodes on the podcast this year that go into how rapidly culture and politics in the world are spinning out of control. So, one thing I've thought of, I haven't acted on it, was just to cut off. Like I take a couple of weeks off the grid in the summer every July. And it's amazing, we go to this little cabin on this beautiful lake about an hour northeast of where I live. And when I'm not paying attention to the news, it's amazing. Like the sun rises and it sets and everything's quiet and you have 3 meals a day and you maybe head out on the water for the day. And you have no idea what's happening in Washington or Moscow or Ottawa or, Canberra or London. You just have no idea. And it's like, not a bad way to live. Go off the grid. On the other hand, I feel called to help leaders navigate church and culture, and it's not a lot of fun. So I would say, transparently, I'm working on it. I've got a few things that I think have helped, and I want to offer that to you. I'm not going to bury my head in the sand. I don't feel like that's probably the most responsible thing for me to do. But here's a couple of things I've done. Number one, I've cut out TV news. The only time I can honestly remember watching TV news in the last 4 years is around election time, US or Canadian election. I'm Canadian. So that's it. I just want to see who's winning where. And even there was an election recently, and I just, used my phone to navigate that one. TV news is monetized to grab your attention. And even when there's no news, they have to have news. I mean, you go back to the launch of CNN in, I think it was 1984. Prior to that, the news fit into 25 minutes a day. It was curated, and that was it, right? The average newscast, 6:30 on a weekday night, would take you through what happened in the world today. That's all you needed to know. Done. Now it's just this constant outrage, trying to get clicks. Great book on this, by the way, is Chris Hayes, The Siren's Call. It's all about the attention economy. He's actually a news broadcaster, but he talks about how attention is really the economy that we're at right now. Another thing, so I cut out TV. Second thing I did, I get 90% of my news from paid sources. Okay, so I'm going to sound OG here, old school, but I subscribe to a number of newspapers with different political slants. Some, moderate, some more conservative, a couple little leaning left, just so I get more balanced, but I actually pay for it. And the reason I pay for it is they have reporters. It's not just opinion pieces. I still think it's a little more reliable. Now, do I get actually a physical newspaper? No, I get it on my phone, but I pay for subscriptions. So that's a second thing. I think if you pay for the sources of your news, you're going to get more reliable news. But hey, we live in a big world of spin. And if you're reading the New York Times, you should read something more conservative. If you're reading something conservative, you should read something a little more left-leaning as well, just to balance, and understand how other people think. Another thing I did, and this is very recent in the last few months, but starting with 2025, I set my phone to limit what I see each day. And I have limits on two things: news consumption and social media. So after 45 minutes of consumption in a day, and it's amazing how quickly that racks up, I get cut off. Now you can override it, but I'm paying more attention to it. That has helped, even though this has been a very tumultuous year. A couple of other things I do. Books and magazines are really helpful. I subscribe to the Harvard Business Review. I subscribe to The Atlantic. I have a friend who subscribes to The Economist, which is kind of an objective thing. I have a couple of online subscriptions too, but actually a magazine that comes to my house can be really good because it gets you out of the news cycle of boom, 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 and gets you into more opinion pieces. And then in terms of staying current with culture, yeah, I'm not getting younger, but I surround myself with people younger than me who have a pulse on culture. And then finally, I do subscribe to some news digests because I don't want to be bombarded with notifications. I've said for years, turn all notifications off on your phone. Generally, I do that. But I subscribe to, just to name two, The Morning Brew and The Hustle. And those really help me stay in touch. They're news digests and they have opinion pieces. So that helps. And then I write a newsletter too. I do On the Rise. So if you haven't subscribed to that, check it out. I think it's ontherisenewsletter.com. That's less news. That's more fun, curious things I found on the internet. But that's what I'm doing. I don't have a good answer. I don't like my answer, but it's a challenge we're all facing. That's what I'm doing to engage that one. Next question is from Avalon. Avalon on social said, what are healthy leadership habits and practices that lead to longevity and continued intimacy with God? Okay, so Avalon, this one's haunted me. I want to make sure I get the angle of your question right, but this one has haunted me my whole life. All right, longevity and continued intimacy with God. So I am in a hurry. I'm always in a hurry. I'm always trying to get stuff done. I want to speed up my devotions. I want to speed up my work. I want to optimize my workflow. And when you think about intimacy, intimacy never happens in a hurry, right? So I'm trying to prolong my devotion time. Did not have a particularly great one today. I had a number of just personal stressors going on in my life. And so, but I had a really good one a couple days ago. And guess what? I'm going to go at it again tomorrow. And maybe my prayer time will be a little bit better than it was today. Intimacy is a long obedience in the same direction, right? And when I think about it, what I want to find and what I'm still moving toward is a sustainable pace in my life. So I have a bunch of rules. By the way, if you've entered that, giving away my book At Your Best on YouTube, this covers it in a lot more detail than I'm going to in the answer to this question. But I realized a long time ago that time off is not going to heal you. Like 2 weeks or 4 weeks of vacation, I take July off every year, is not going to solve a sustainable pace. You have to figure out a rhythm that is time on. All right. So, time off won't heal you when the problem is how you spend your time on. So when I'm on, like today is a work day for me, I've got to find a sustainable pace. So what have I done to do that? Well, a couple of things, and this is an ongoing challenge too. I have had to elevate the level at which I say no. I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday about this, and some of the things I'm saying no to today, speaking requests, opportunities, invitations, I would have never dreamed to get 5 years ago. But now it's like, no, I can only do so many things. I can only speak at so many events. I can only take so many meetings. And I know if I take too many, then I'm running too fast. I get tired. I get grumpy. That is not a recipe for longevity or a healthy habit in leadership. So I have to continually, and talk to Katie, my assistant, about this. This is a weekly dialogue. Like, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? And it seems to get harder every year. But you've got to maintain that level of no. Another thing that I would say has really helped me, I think a lot about this. Again, I wrote about this in At Your Best. So if you win one of the 5 copies, you're going to see more about this. But Dunbar's number. Robin Dunbar is a British evolutionary psychologist, not a Christian, but has some amazing insights on our relational capacity. And his basic thesis is most people throughout human history knew about 150 to 200 people in their lives. Yeah, we lived in cities, but you'd know 150 to 200 people. Or if you lived in a medieval village in Europe or something like that, or Asia, you knew 150 to 200 people. And that's our relational capacity. Social media has blown that to smithereens. Most of you have hundreds, if not thousands of followers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. And now, your ability to have meaningful relationships has blown up. And Dunbar's main point is that all of us have the capacity for 3 to 5 close personal friendships. Now, when you look at how most people navigate those friendships today, that inner circle, those 3 to 5, are empty. It's like, well, I got all these followers online and I got all these people at our church and I know all these people and I manage all these volunteers. Yeah, I got a full quiver. I got a lot of people. But if you really look at who knows you, I got a couple of friends helping me in the studio today. I've known them for 20 years. Shout out to Justin and Sarah. They rang the doorbell and I'm like, you guys don't need to ring the doorbell. Just come in here, hang up your own coats. I was making coffee, right? That kind of thing. You need people in that inner circle who know you so well. There's no pretense. Friends who just can come in and put their head down on your kitchen island and tell you how bad their day was. You need that. I've been working very intentionally on making sure that I have 3 to 5 of those intimate, close, personal, in-person friendships. You need those. And so that's what I would say. Also, reference a devotional life that has nothing to do with work. I already talked about that. So those are some habits. Okay, next question. This one's from Noah. So Noah, we're going to drill down. I like this question, so I want to talk about this in a greater detail. But Noah's question is, how do you recommend young leaders go about finding deep friends in leadership? Yeah, so building on Dunbar's number, which we just talked about, the reality is you can follow Scott Galloway or other people who talk about this. Most of us have nobody in that circle of 3 to 5. So I want to talk specifically to church leaders, and I'm just going to be transparent. It's hard. It's really difficult. Okay, so when I was lead pastor of Connexus, by the time I moved to a founding pastor role, we had 3,500, 4,000 people who called our church home. So on the one hand, you go like, oh my goodness, all these people. And you get out in the lobby and everybody wants to talk to you and everybody's your friend and everything. So here we are years later. And you know what I'm down to? We're really friendly with people. We still attend our church. We're there on Sunday and we have great conversations with people. But I'm down to like 3 to 5 people who are part of our church who are still part of our lives. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not social with other people when I'm at our church, but I want to give you a case study, okay? One of the people I considered my best friends was on the elder board when I was a lead pastor for years. And then the question is, okay, well, is he still your friend now that you're not the lead pastor? And the answer was yes. So we're going to see him tonight, actually. And we hang out in the summer, all kinds of time together. But I didn't know that until I wasn't the lead pastor anymore. So you're kind of in that place like, are they really my friends? Are they really not your friends? So here's a filter, Noah, you can use. Most of you listening to this have probably moved already and think about, okay, if you used to be at another church, you used to be in another city, or you went to college in a town, who are the people that you still connect with? Because maybe you knew 100 people in your last city, whatever that is, but you're probably really only close with 2 or 3 of them now, maybe 1 from college. So the question is, what was it about that person that made the relationship endure the setting? Because that's a question that you're going to have to answer now where you are. And then you want to look at those qualities and characteristics. And I want to give you a little cheat code, okay? This is from Arthur Brooks, who's been a guest on this podcast. It's the difference between deal friends and real friends. And I love that. That was one of my favorite insights from his book, From Strength to Strength. And he said, most of the people you know when you're in leadership are deal friends. That is, I have a lot of friends because they want to be guests on this podcast. I have a lot of friends who want me to speak, who want me to do this because I do something that, theoretically has some value in the church space. Most of those are deal friends. In other words, if I was to stop doing this today, my phone will not blow up from those people, right? So I love the way that Arthur Brooks talks about the difference. He says, your real friends are useless, but not worthless. And what he means is they can't really help you. Like my friend who was on the elder board, we help each other with our boats in the spring and in the fall. We kind of hang out, but like he can't help me grow this podcast. He's a medical doctor. I can't help him with his practice. I can't do it. So I'm kind of functionally useless to him, but we love hanging out. And that means they're not worthless. They're incredibly valuable. So the way to do this now is to find someone outside your circle. And what I would suggest is you don't work for them and they don't work for you. So you don't work for them, they don't work for you. That means probably someone outside your church. You can have friends who go to your church or who are on your staff, but what happens after they're not around anymore or you leave that church? So what you want to do is you want to find someone outside your circle. And, I've seen this. I've seen leaders who have fallen, and what they realize is everybody that was close to them either worked for them or they worked for them. They don't actually have any true friends. So you don't want to be that person. You want to find someone who really can't help you in your career, but is just a great person to hang around. Hang around them, and maybe you go to the gym. Maybe you find someone at a club, you join a club, or you have a sport, you start playing pickleball, and there's somebody who's like totally outside of your field, and you want to find that person, they become a friend, and away you go. So those are some ideas. It's really hard. You're probably only going to know who the friend is after you leave your current position. But here's the good news. You only need 3 to 5, right? You don't need 30, just need 3 to 5. And that circle is probably going to change. Like somebody who was in that circle 5 years ago may have moved to an outer circle now, but then you need someone to fill that. And again, most people don't have it, so you want to keep working on that. And then the final question today, Joey saved the hardest for the last. Joey's was short. How do you fire people? Okay, Joey, thanks for the easy question. Okay. Footnote, yes, I went to law school. No, this is not legal advice. Please consult with an actual employment attorney. Do not take this as legal advice. But I'm going to share some principles along the way. Okay, there are 2 ways to fire people. And most people don't understand this. You can fire someone for cause, or you can fire someone without cause. What does cause mean? Cause means you stole something, you committed a crime, you're fired. Or if you have a moral turpitude clause or a standard of behaviors, you had an affair that breached our employment contract, we're going to let you go. So in other words, they did something that caused them to be terminated. Now, you have to be really careful. That's why you have to see a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. But that's one way to do it. Now, for gross incompetence, let's say somebody's just bad at their job, that's really hard to prove, okay? You can say, well, it's for cause, they're just not very good at it, but you've got to be able to prove that they're not good at it. And to do that, you need steps and you need, well, they were warned, et cetera, but that's still really difficult to determine, which takes us to the second category, which is not for cause. Vast majority of people who are terminated under the not for cause category. So what's the difference? Well, if you're terminated for cause, let's say I stole money from the church, okay? You do not need to pay a severance package. There's no severance. I did something that was cause related, or, I punched a coworker. Okay, well, that's assault. And you can't work here anymore. You do not owe them severance. You have to make sure that the cause is clear. Now, the vast majority of people get fired under the not for cause category. And that means, they weren't doing particularly well, but we're going to offer them some severance, all right? And that is the biggest distinction that you have. So the reality, according to the law, you can let people go at any time for any reason, and people do. You just have to pay them. Now, if you want to be a good employer, here's a general rule. That's sort of again, check with your lawyer, but that's an overview of for cause and not for cause. Now you want to take it up and ratchet it up as a Christian. What about the case where you have a for cause termination? Well, first of all, that's going to be really rare. It might happen once or twice in your career, right? You do leadership for 30, 40 years, might happen once or twice that there's a for cause. Always involve the lawyers, talk to your insurer, make sure you've got actual cause, et cetera, and then you can proceed. But not for cause, which is the vast majority of terminations. Let's say you're a young leader, you inherited someone else's staff, and it's just not going well. They're just not performing. They're not on board with the mission. And you can say, well, that's cause. Well, not really, not legally, it's not. But what you want to do, you could do a couple of routes. One is to do a performance improvement plan. Hey, Carey, you need to shape up, or we're going to have to take some action here. And here are the 3 areas I need to see improvement in. We're going to have clear objectives. We're going to meet again in 30 days, and we're going to see if you hit those objectives. Now, you can do that, and then theoretically, you could still fire for cause if they don't hit it, but it's very difficult to prove. Often there's litigation. You probably don't want to go there. So again, you'll want to check with counsel on that to make sure it works well. Probably the better way to go is just to be really generous with someone and say, you know what, I really thank you for what you're doing. You want to walk with them and let them know it's not working out. Give them a chance to make it better. Most of the time, it doesn't really work out particularly well. And then give them a generous severance package. And by generous, I mean, don't look up the legislation in your state or province and say, well, we'll give you the bare minimum. I mean, consult with a lawyer, consult with an employment lawyer, give them a very generous severance package, be kind, let them leave with their dignity. Maybe you want to help them find a new position. But the bottom line is, I think, if you're fired for cause, could be a surprise to you because you got caught. But if you're fired not for cause, it should never be a surprise. You probably want to coach them a little bit. You want to let them know, hey, this isn't going particularly well. We really want to see an improvement in this area. And then if they can't improve, which often for a variety of reasons they can't, then you give them a very generous severance package. You help them. And if you do this well, I know of a church that different staff have left over the years. Attrition happens over time, and some have been let go. And the people who have been let go still attend the church. It's that's crazy. That's when you do termination really well. That's when you've been generous. That's when you let people leave with their dignity. That's when you allow people to hold their head high. while they go out, and you thank them, you acknowledge the good. Again, all this should be done with attorneys, et cetera, but I really hope this helps. Well, I didn't get to nearly all the questions that came in. I got to tell you, there is a lot more to cover. So next episode, we're going to come back and we are going to have more questions. So I've kind of talked about the personal stuff. Next time, we're going to talk about organizational leadership. We've got some questions already queued up on, is there a natural ceiling that churches can't grow beyond their current size? Like you just get stuck at a lid. How do you handle that? How do you help a small church in a small community reach its potential? What about change dynamics? So we got a lot of questions coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can drop a question you maybe want me to deal with in the comments, and we'll see if we do that on a future episode of Pick Your Brain. And maybe if you're listening, shoot me an email at carey@careynieuwhof.com and we can go from there. Hey, I'm so glad. Let me know what you think of this format. Is this helpful to you? We love serving young leaders. And if you're ready to lead with confidence, you want to strengthen your mission, I mentioned the Art of Leadership Academy. I would love for you to join it. So here's what happens. You not only get to ask me questions on the regular, because I'm in that chat pretty much daily, but you'll get unlimited access to all of our resources, proven strategies, plus a vibrant community of over 1,700 leaders you can learn from and grow with. So you can check it out at theartofleadershipacademy.com or click the link wherever you're tuning in from. In the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you identify and break a growth barrier you're facing, and we'll catch you next time on the podcast.